Hello everyone, and thank you for joining Constellation Payments webinar EMV chip cards and the October 1st merchant liability shift, what you need to know to prepare. Our presenter is Mr. Rick Ellis. Rick is a business development executive with Constellation Payments, a proprietary gateway and merchant services provider with special expertise in software integration and recurring transactions. Rick has over 20 years of experience operating a membership-based company built around a lucrative recurring revenue business model. As an executive for Constellation Payments, Rick enjoys working through complex business models and leveraging proven payment processing strategies for maximum effect. Today, Rick will cover EMV chip technology, the upcoming EMV standards that go into effect on October 1st, and what you need to know to prepare properly and protect your business from risk and fraud. So let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Rick Ellis.
Well, thanks for that really nice introduction, Kristen. And I would like to just quickly say hello to all of you on the call. I know we have quite a few folks on the call, and it looks like we have a nice mix of both merchants as well as software providers and those who have a provider outlook on this EMV shift. So we're going to have to discuss both sides of that coin, what it's like to be a merchant, what it's like to be a consumer, and then what it might be like to be a provider of software with POS functionality, for example. So it's good. The good news is that all of us are also consumers ourselves, so we can relate to most of these things at each stage in the game. So, you know, the big question is, what is this shift we all keep hearing about? What is it? Is it real? This is the big question I get asked a lot. Is this the real one? Or is the deadline a real deadline, or will there be yet another shift in the deadline? Well, all indications suggest that this is absolutely 100% the final deadline. Everyone in the payment processing industry is working to be compliant and offer compliant solutions to their partners and to their merchants on or before October the 1st. So, you know, there's some confusion at times. What exactly is EMV? Is that the same as a chip card? Is that just encryption? Does it really work? There's a lot of interesting questions and several misconceptions. And then, you know, quite frankly, and I actually had an email this morning to me from a merchant who said, why should I care? And there's a lot of really good and important reasons why we should all care on the consumer side, on the merchant side, and on the software provider side. So our good friend William Shakespeare says, a rose by any other name would still smell as sweet. My gosh, I don't know how EMV cards smell, but I can tell you they sure do have a lot of names. All of the names on this slide represent the same thing. A chip-enabled card that can be used to process EMV transactions in conjunction with an EMV-enabled terminal. So EMV, some of you may already have a chip-enabled card. If you do, this gold square, something very similar to that, is already on your card. And believe it or not, we have now got technology micronized to the point that what you're looking at is an actual computer chip. It's an integrated circuit. So EMV is an acronym for EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa. These are the three companies that initiated this process. It started in Europe, and everything was done to combat fraud. Fraud is a terrible problem. It doesn't pretty much a day go by that we don't hear about some new case of credit card fraud, whether that's skimming or hacking. It's a real problem. The problem trickles down all the way to the consumer and drives prices up. It can be it's just a multifaceted issue, and the EMV solution seems to be a really great one. It's produced some wonderful results, which we'll talk about shortly. I'm excited. As a consumer, to be honest, I'm very excited about this. So EMV cards are very, very difficult to duplicate, and we'll talk about that in detail in a minute. But suffice to say that you can't just open shop and start duplicating EMV cards for the black market like you might have heard has been done in the past for magnetic stripe cards. And as we'll get into more detail in a few minutes, the data, if someone were to intercept it, if someone were to hack into a system that uses an EMV terminal and try to intercept the data, it's completely, utterly useless to thieves. And so, like many things, once you figure out that once thieves figure out that the thing they're trying to steal will provide no value to them, they don't even attempt to try to steal it, which the results in Europe and Canada suggest is exactly what's happening. So this is an EMV card, and again, I'm sure that this image or a similar one is very familiar to most of us on the call. Some of us may have already in our possession an EMV-enabled card, and if not, I suspect you will be getting one in the coming months from your bank or your credit card company. The key identifiers, obviously, the software chip that we've already discussed, all of the same information that you're used to seeing on your card, including a magnetic stripe. And this is, we're speaking, I should address that. We're talking about how the EMV shift will affect consumers and businesses in the United States. So in the United States, as EMV begins to become a part of daily life, starting especially on October the 1st, there's been a lot of forethought put into the process, and we all know that some merchants and even some industries will be slower to adopt chip and pin and chip and signature technology, and so there will be a period of time where there will need to be the ability to use both the legacy system of magnetic stripes and the more modern, more secure EMV chip and pin systems. Pardon me. So you'll see all the normal things that you're used to seeing, plus the addition of the software security chip. So, is it worth it? Does it work? And I think that there's enough data now, I'm confident that there's enough data now to answer with a resounding yes. The greatest thing about, for us in the US, is that there is plenty of data from Europe and Canada as to how EMV has affected in those areas. Specifically, these guys did it first. They were the pioneers. And so we can look at this and we can see how Canada and EU transaction volume and fraud volume and the percentage of changes in those were affected by EMV technology. And to be clear, for those of you who may not get a chance to be in either of these places, either anywhere in Europe, in the EU, or don't get a lot of chance to travel north to Canada, this is the standard technology in both of these places. It's almost impossible to find a merchant that is not using an EMV terminal or an EMV solution in their business, whether it's anything that's public facing, whether that's a government agency. If you have a government agency, you go to renew your driver's license, there's fees that have to be paid for that. And credit card is the most preferred payment type, and so this technology affects not just commercial businesses, but literally any entity that collects payment via credit cards. So we can see these couple of statistics that I really like. 73% of fraud losses in Canada and over 80% in EU. If we could get those types of odds in a casino, we'd all quit our jobs and retire. So if I'm betting on the success in the U.S., I'm looking at these two numbers and I'm feeling quite confident that as a consumer, I can have less worries about having my credit card data used nefariously by a thief. I can share with you just on a personal level that in the last 18 months, I have been contacted by my bank 3 times to be told that I would be issued a new card because there had been a data theft either at a physical location where I presented that card or at due to online activity. So EMV affects card present transactions only. So when you're looking at credit card processing solutions and the security needs that your company might have, it's very good and very important to consider all the different places that you accept credit cards. If you have an online presence, then you're going to need to make sure that your payment gateway that you use for online transactions, Constellation Payments being a great example, that they've done all the modernization, that they've updated, that they're staying ahead of the curve for online transactions, and then also that you have the ability to acquire a physical terminal if you have a customer-facing application. So, as I just kind of alluded, there's 2 main kinds of fraud, and the first one of those is card not present. Those are those online hacking type scenarios where someone gets a hold of your data, goes on to a e-commerce site or similar, and attempts to perpetrate fraud using your number. So the technology for discovering this fraud is ever-changing. It's exciting to watch. I will proudly tell you that I am a payment industry nerd, and I'm really excited to see. I get really excited. I was at a convention earlier this year, and hearing those folks that spend every waking moment trying to anticipate the next way someone's going to try to perpetrate card not present fraud and how we can stop them in their tracks, lock them out, and or catch them. So it's really exciting. I promise you, whether you're a consumer, a merchant, or a software provider, very bright minds are working to make sure that card not present fraud is reduced as well. Now, we're going to come back to that in a minute because it's going to bear, EMV is going to affect that in a significant way as it did in Europe and Canada. So, probably one of the most well-known instances of fraud for card not present was the 56 million card numbers that were stolen from servers belonging to Home Depot. Now, once those card numbers are available on the black market, which happens sadly in literally minutes after the theft occurs often, then they can be sold to the highest bidder and they can be used for online transactions. And that's a perfect example of what a card not present transaction or a fraud transaction might look like. So, this is a very significant problem for industry, for business, for government. We all, either as merchants, as consumers, or as providers of online transactions, have got to make sure that we are constantly staying up with the best technology, using the best partners, finding companies you can trust so that you don't have to spend your time educating yourself heavily in an area that isn't going to add to your bottom line. So then next is card present fraud, which is where EMV is technology is focusing to solve. And probably the one, if you watch any news programs, you've heard of a card skimmer. Now, if you haven't, it won't take you very long to Google some pretty staggering and scary results about how a card present fraud might take place here. So there are criminals are very bright, and there's some bright folks that have built a plastic cover that can be affixed over a legitimate card reader in places like ATMs where you might present a card and have it read manually by a machine. And while your transaction may or may not go through as it was originally planned, the magnetic stripe on the back of a traditional credit or ATM card has just been read, that data has been captured, and in many cases it was instantaneously transmitted wirelessly to a nearby fraudster, and it is already out and in the open. So card skimmers are very scary, very pervasive, and sadly, again, I think eBay and others are trying to change this, but access to this technology for those who want to steal data is readily available. It is sadly very inexpensive, and I'm quite sure that if I gave my 10-year-old son the right keywords to type into Google and handed him my credit card, I could have arrive at my door, and you could have arrive at your door, a card skimmer in a short period of time. So that's how easy they are to acquire. They're very easy to deploy, and so EMV seeks to nullify the effectiveness of this type of technology, and again, it's done a really, really good job. So the big question then for merchants is, well, you know, I don't want to. I don't like it. I think it's going to be too expensive, or I don't like being told what to do. This is my business. I don't want to do that. And the truth is that technically no one can make you, but the decision to not upgrade to EMV technology comes with it some consequences that could be important to know and highly could affect your business in a very negative way should you find yourself in the crosshairs of a fraudster. So this is the basis of the email that I got this morning, and said, well, I'm not required. Merchants aren't required to support EMV. This is true. This is true. You can resist right now and refuse to upgrade technology and not prepare to read EMV cards. However, who pays for fraud right now? Well, right now, and as it has been for the longest time, the card issuers are the ones that bear the brunt of most of the fraud. Well, they've all gotten together, they've created this wonderful technology called EMV, and they've provided it to you at great expense, and in return for all of this investment in time and assets and money, the issuers say, well, from this point forward, under certain conditions, we are no longer going to cover your risk and the risk associated with transactions that result in fraud. So on October 1st of this year, and again, I will stress that there is no indication anywhere that this deadline is anything but 100% real and enforceable starting October the 1st. But on October the 1st, any merchant, business, government agency, anyone who accepts payments via credit card, ATM card, debit card, will be responsible for certain risks due to fraud that they currently are protected from. So specifically, if something happens, the question that I want to ask right away is, okay, so in what circumstances do I have to write a check when something goes wrong? So here it is. I think this is a very good slide to kind of give you the understanding of where the different scenarios and how they affect you. So right now, if you have a magnetic stripe card and you have a magnetic stripe only terminal, and I realize that a close look at this particular terminal we have here has a little EMV chip and pin slot in the front of it, so we'll all just try to imagine an old dumb terminal that only reads via magnetic stripe. But in that case, if the technology is old that's presented, the card, and the technology used to read the card is old, then the issuer will cover the fraud. However, as we know, more and more issuers are rolling out the EMV cards, you will become hard-pressed shortly to find a scenario where your customers are presenting to you a magnetic stripe card. So now you have a magnetic stripe card that's presented to you. You have an EMV terminal available. Somehow, some way, fraud still occurs. You're covered. You're covered. It's not going to be a problem. Now, this is the one that should wake you up in the middle of the night and say, I have to do something to protect my business, my family. And as a merchant, as a consumer, it should give you a huge amount of relief. If your bank or your credit card issues you an EMV-enabled card and you bring it to a merchant who has, for one reason or another, not upgraded to EMV technology, the merchant is going to be liable. And because of that, that is a huge motivator for merchants to upgrade their technology. So what does that mean? Well, if your card information is stolen and used to purchase thousands and thousands of dollars of merchandise online or in another country, you will be, the consumer will be protected. However, that bill now goes to the merchant. So if somebody buys 10 big screen TVs and the source of the fraud is determined to have been in a merchant environment where they were presented an EMV card but didn't upgrade, the merchant will have to write the check to cover the costs of that theft and that fraud. So finally, if everybody's upgraded their technology properly, then as you would imagine, everyone is covered and the issuer addresses this cost as this cost of doing business. And quite frankly, I would imagine that this would be very rare. So again, it's a very simple scenario. If you are in the position to accept payment and you are presented an EMV-enabled card, yet you lack the technology to utilize the encryption and protection of that card, and fraud occurs on your terminal, you are liable for all of the expenses related to that fraud. And I suspect that will not end at the cost simply of any merchandise that might be purchased. But as a business owner myself, and I, as Kristen alluded, I've owned membership-based businesses for quite some time. Most of those were customer-facing, and you know, I can think of a number of people who might like you to pay their expenses associated with this fraud, those that are negatively affected by that. So keep that in mind. That's the number one reason. And here's the question. So you know, if I'm a small merchant, well, why? We have to worry about this if we own a Target, right, Rick? We don't need this if we're a small merchant. Well, that's an interesting question, and here's my response to that. If we look at what happened in Europe, and in Canada for that matter, but especially in Europe, is, you know, the fraudsters they're pretty clever folks. They're keeping up with what's happening, and they're looking for new opportunities, and they're trying to distill down where their opportunities are and spend their efforts in the right places. Well, if you were a fraudster and you had the ability to reproduce magnetic stripe cards based on skimmed numbers that you have in your possession, then you're going to go to places that only accept magnetic stripe cards to perpetrate fraudulent purchases. So if you don't upgrade your terminal, you immediately become a really good target for a fraudster who's using fraudulent mag stripe cards. So don't be surprised if you, for one reason or another, choose to not upgrade and find yourself a increased target to fraud. So I think it's all the more reason why we should do it. So two types of terminals, and again, remember the terminal is the key here, right? We're talking about card present fraud. You are handing your card, in the old style, you would hand your card to a person who would process a transaction in the flesh, in a store, in a government agency. They would hand it back to you, and you would complete your transaction. So, integrated terminals. An integrated terminal, many of you have probably used one, whether you knew you were using one or not, I'm not sure, but an integrated terminal looks identical to a non-integrated terminal, the difference being that the firmware and the software that is running that terminal is specifically designed to work with a specific software application. So at Constellation Payments, we have many partners who provides software to a large variety of industries, everything from health and fitness to small businesses and government agencies. And so if you own a storage facility or a flower shop or a hair salon, you might purchase a third-party product that allows you to manage that type of business, and embedded in that product may be the ability to have a point of sale functionality so that you can take payment directly through your software and have all of your accounting information recorded in one place. You're going to need an integrated terminal to use that software. So to be clear, because Rick Ellis and his family are bargain hunters and we love Google, so we're going to be tempted, if we don't educate ourselves, to just start Googling and trying to find a product that has the lowest cost associated with it. The problem is it doesn't work with the software you're using in your business or in your government agency. So again, for merchants, a lot of this may be dictated to them by someone higher up, but if we are the entity that is in a position to dictate, it's important that we understand how integration works, why it's there, how it's different than standalone terminals, etc. So there's we have a software development kit and a very clean API that allows software companies to painlessly, or as near painless as possible, offer their users an integrated solution that works directly with their software exactly how it should, so that there's ease of use at the customer-facing moments and a high level of reliability when it comes to data security, and also its ability to not inhibit, the terminal's ability to not inhibit the functionality of the core software product. So if you use a piece of software, if you're a merchant on this call, and you run a health club or a martial arts school or any sort of customer-facing business, and you use a piece of software to handle your point of sale, and you have a customer-facing application for that, you're going to need an integrated terminal. So most likely some of those of you that are on the call are already using a product that is either integrated or will shortly be integrated with Constellation Payments, and so you should very soon be receiving information regarding integrated terminals for use with that software. So then there's standalone terminals or non-integrated terminals. And again, this, if you walk into a small business in your own neighborhood, you're very likely to interact with a non-integrated terminal. Now, the rules for EMV do not show any favoritism for integrated versus non-integrated. This is simply an ever-present issue for any merchant. And in fact, there are some merchants that have a need for both types of terminals. So it behooves you to spend time to say, okay, what are the scenarios where I need an integrated terminal, and where are the scenarios that I'm accepting cards in a non-integrated fashion that I'm going to need to have adjustments for EMV made. A great example that I can think of is that there's a lot of folks using various wireless technology. So if I've got a large store, I may have associates that carry with them some sort of a wireless terminal device to ease the clogging of the lines at the main point of sale. Well, if you're one of those merchants, you're going to need a wireless solution. If that wireless solution is not integrated with a software product, you're still going to need an EMV wireless solution. So there's really no scenario where you aren't going to need to upgrade to EMV technology. The question simply becomes, how much do I need to spend? We're going to go over that in a little bit. What are going to be the changes in the way we do business? We'll talk about that in a minute as well. And how fast do I need to change, et cetera, et cetera. So regardless of your application, whether you have a non-integrated or integrated terminal, you will need to upgrade or accept responsibility for that liability, that very expensive liability cost after October the 1st. So then, again, the natural question, how much is it going to cost? So this is where having a good partner really pays off. For example, if you wanted to purchase outright a terminal from from us at Constellation Payments, for example, there are inexpensive solutions that are a couple $100, and when you consider again the amazing technology that you are now having access to and the amount of protection that it gives you, your business, your family, it's really a small price to pay. On the other hand of that coin, if you imagine the huge amount of costs that you might have to associate with after fraud, 200 seems like a very small price to pay, right? So I think that it makes sense for everyone. Now, that's a very simple terminal that would be used in a very simple application, and in fact, you can have an integrated terminal with a similar price point, and some of our partners do offer integrated terminals at a price point at or around $200 to $300 for very specific use cases that don't require a large amount of complexity. So you can get, and probably have seen as a consumer, some very complex terminals, and we have those available for our partners as well, and some of them are integrating with those as makes the best sense with their software application. But if you've ever been to a major retailer, you're probably starting to see these larger terminals, almost a tablet size, and you'll notice that there's some increased functionality to them that makes the cost even more palatable. My pharmacy allows me to look up my my frequent customer number via entry of my telephone number in case I don't have my frequent user card handy, and then I can get the discounts that are afforded to me for being a member of that program. So that's an example of how some of these more advanced terminals can be programmed by software providers to take advantage of the increased functionality and provide benefits both to the business and to its customers. So as a business owner or as a software provider, you just have to kind of go through all the use case scenarios of what you currently offer and then say, okay, well, what other opportunities does this new technology afford us that might be of benefit to our clients and our users, and that might make worth supporting a more robust machine worth doing, right? So then, that kind of leads to the second question, which is, so how much, besides a terminal, how much will it cost? And unfortunately, this is an answer that has to end with it depends. There's just too many scenarios, a wide variety of use cases. It's too difficult for me to anticipate what the development costs would be, for example, for a software provider. But if you are a software provider, I suspect you have a really great team that can get you started on that. You're certainly welcome to reach out to us on a one-off basis and say, here's what we're doing, here's what we want to do. We want to get a ballpark idea of, based on these, this set of parameters, what we should expect to pay to or invest to integrate these terminals with our software. So that's something that we at Constellation Payments can help you with, and I'll give you some contact information at the end that will allow you to do exactly that. So, but if you just need a standalone terminal, you can probably do so for a non-integrated standard terminal. You can probably do that for a very low cost. So for the business owners and merchants that are on this call, it's really not that much, and it's a really good peace of mind. Also, for those of you who manage large businesses or provide software to people who manage large businesses, it's important to consider all the different use cases, and it may even, as for software providers, it may be of high value to reach out to some of your merchants and say, what are your needs? What's a typical day look like? Where are all the transactions taking place? Because, for example, in health clubs, you may have a very robust touchscreen multimedia terminal at the front counter, but then you may have a personal trainer that just needs to swipe or process a transaction, an EMV transaction for $30, $50, $70, and they don't need all that functionality. So you may need a combination of low-tech and high-tech solutions. So take time to learn your customer, take time to understand the use cases, and then I think the most important thing is to consider not just how we use it now, but how we might want to use it in the future. So that's really exciting to me. So in just a second, I'll pull the trigger on Q&A. One thing that that is worth mentioning is how do I accept these cards if I'm a merchant? What's going to change for me at the point of sale? So we'll assume that you've got all your integration, everything's done, you're ready, you've been presented with your first chip and PIN card. Well, first thing that you'll be happy to know is that no matter what your staff may do, and we're certainly happy to provide you upon request with some guidelines for how to train your staff to use EMV technology, but even if they make a mistake and swipe the magnetic stripe on an EMV card, because all EMV cards in the near future will have both technologies, as I mentioned, there will be information on the magnetic stripe that identifies this as a chip-enabled card. The terminal will then prompt the consumer to insert the chip end of their card into the slot. And if I back us all the way up, there we go. You can see that slot in the front is the EMV slot I'm referring to. And then that allows your staff also to become, it's a bit of a notification, a little bit of a hey, you missed this. The customer has presented you with an EMV card. So over time, it's a self-solving problem. The EMV cards are inserted and left in the machine. That's a little different than what we're used to, where we keep, we hold on to the card, swipe it through, and keep it. Now, the good news is that the way EMV works, the consumer retains possession of their card. So I put my card in the slot, and I'm the one that takes it out as a consumer. So that's, again, an added level of protection for me to know that I'm the only person that has handled this physical card during this transaction. Now, from that point on, there's a couple of different scenarios. For example, the most likely scenario in the US will be chip and signature, meaning that after the chip card is inserted and the transaction is processed, the customer will be prompted to offer a physical signature, much like they do today. There will be some issuers that may early on support chip and PIN, in which case your issuer will instruct you on how to create a PIN for your new chip card and how to use it. However, my best guess, based on where the industry is headed, is that we will first see chip and signature, and then slowly we will see signatures replaced by chip and PIN. And when I say that, slowly, 2-3 years, and it's going to happen on an issuer by issuer basis. So it'll be interesting to see how fast issuers switch over. But for the near future, as a merchant, you can expect that they'll insert their card into the slot, and then they'll sign either on a touch screen or on a physical receipt. Now, many of us, almost the largest portion of the population who owns a cell phone these days is very likely to own a cell phone that is enabled with what's called NFC, which is near field communication. This is a wireless communication that allows two devices with that same wireless chip to communicate. More commonly, you might have heard of Android Pay and Apple Pay and solutions like that. However, in addition to those two communication devices, there are also payment cards themselves that contain that NFC technology, and so there is a wireless option, and at Constellation Payments, all of our terminals are enabled to accept this type of payment. And so if you choose to enable it and choose to use it, your consumers will be able to use their wireless devices or their NFC-enabled payment cards to make a wireless transaction, either by, for example, in this case of the card, you have a what's called a contact payment, where you touch your card to a device, an antenna that is affixed to the top of the terminal. And again, as a consumer, you've probably seen those already. If you're not, you'll notice them after today. And then, as we're all kind of getting, I think, excited about, is the idea of pulling out our cell phone and touching a button or two, never having to hand over our payment card or expose any of our account numbers and account information that's imprinted on that card, and simply having the transaction takes place wirelessly, EMV protected, 100% encrypted, nice, safe, and sound. So I think that's a good primer on how that works. Kristen, I'm guessing we have some questions by now. So what have you got for me?
Yes, we do, and I just want to reiterate for everyone listening in, on your control panel there is a questions section. That's where you'll go ahead and type in your question into that question box, and I will send the question off to Rick to be answered. Our first question is, outside of the webinar, what type of educational materials will be made available on EMV and the liability shift?
Well, I would definitely say that from Constellation Payments, we are constantly educating our clients and users on all of the best practices and things like that we would like to make sure that they are aware of and educated on, so that they can utilize the technology and make all the changes on the human end. So the How Payments Are Done blog on the csipay.com site will be a great resource for you, as well as upcoming knowledge base articles, etc. And then there are, and forgive me, I'll get it for you before the end of this call, but there are a few sites supported by the issuers themselves that are out there that we can direct you to, that will give you both a merchant and a consumer view of the technology, and review and understand how it affects you again. But I think we've covered the broadest strokes today. Certainly anybody who has a specific question, whether if they don't want to ask it today on the call, I'm going to give you my contact information before we're done, and I'm happy. Like I said, I'm a payments geek, right? So if you send me an interesting question, I'm going to enjoy spending time with you, hashing out a specific use case that might require a specific answer. So we'll help you any way we can.
Okay, great. All right, we have another question. If EMV rules happen to change again down the road, am I going to have to go through another change with my terminal?
I love this question, and it excites me, to be honest. And again, who gets excited about this, right? But I do, because I've been a merchant, and I understand what a burden this can feel like, to have this material change in the way you do business and the costs associated with it, and you feel as though it's being forced upon you. And again, I hope by now you've realized that it's quite the reverse. But that said, all these terminals are enabled in such a way that the firmware that's provided by the manufacturer, and for example, at CSI Pay, we have teamed up with Ingenico, which is one of the largest suppliers of processing terminals, especially they're probably cutting edge when it comes to the best in EMV. All of the terminals will be able to be updated remotely. And so as technology changes, as use cases change, as needs change, you won't need a new terminal, because your current terminal will become a new terminal. And the best analogy I can give you for that is the smartphone that you probably have sitting nearby you. Your smartphone today has a certain amount of functionality, and then Apple or Google pushes out an update, and suddenly there's a miraculous list of new things you can do with the exact same device. So in this scenario, probably those updates won't involve as many new and wacky fun use cases like a cell phone might, but instead will be the incorporation of new levels and layers of technology designed to protect you and your consumers. So there's a term that's being used in the industry called future-proof, and I think that it's an interesting term. It implies what I've just said, that as things change in the future, your terminal can change with it.
Okay, and
Yeah.
we have another question which I'm going to send over to you.
I love when you send it over.
I'll also read it off. With only 2 to 5 transactions a month with a card presented by a member who we know on a non-integrated terminal, what is the possibility of a fraudulent transaction?
Well, okay, so let's go back to this. It's a non-integrated terminal. I heard that. The customer is known to you. And 2 to 5 transactions a month. Those are the main details?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. So, the answer is I don't know. I couldn't, and you don't either, and that's the scary part about it, is that there isn't a scenario where you can afford to let your guard down. As I mentioned, in Europe and in Canada, small merchants became the target of credit card fraud once the larger merchants changed their technology. So the scary part is, again, as I mentioned earlier, is that you're not just risking liability for the transaction amount. This is very important for everyone to understand. But any fraud that takes place as a result of you being presented with an EMV-enabled card and not being able to read it. So if someone were able to attach a skimmer to a device that you control and then use those numbers for transactions even away from your business, you would be liable for not just the costs of those transactions, but any damages that any party involved might feel has been done to them due to the fraud. This also doesn't make you immune from any fines and penalties that may occur. And so, for example, and I know I'm using a large merchant because those are the ones that are the most publicly available to us as far as the stories are concerned, but Target and Home Depot face not only the cost of the transactions, not only the cost of the fines, the several fines that they have, but there's now class action lawsuits that are being put together. And then include in that the horrible PR that comes with that, right? So we're all talking about 2 brand names that would really rather us talk about them in a different way. Well, as a small merchant, you still have those issues to deal with. And I think that it might be a very dangerous risk to say, well, hey, I only do a small amount of transactions every month, and I know most of my customers, and so is this really that big of a deal for me? Well, I would ask you, how important is your family to you, and are you willing to risk your family's financial future, your company's financial future, so that you don't have to spend a couple $100 to upgrade? And by the way, I should mention that at Constellation Payments, in our own experience, we know we're going to be able to offer our clients, and many of our partners will also offer to their users the ability to rent a terminal. So if you don't want, if you need multiple terminals and the idea of a huge cash outlay up at the front is a daunting prospect to you, there are options that will allow you to minimize the cash flow issues that would come with this upgrade, because you can rent, and you can always change that later if you want to or need to. But I suspect, given the tone of the question, that the question is, well, if I'm really not that much risk, why should I bother? And I think the answer is that it's really not that expensive. And in fact, if it is expensive, there are options for you, and it's a much bigger expense when things go wrong. So I hope that answers the question. If I didn't, like I said, in just a few minutes I'll give you my contact information, and you can reach out to me personally.
Okay, thanks.
What else you got?
Another question, which I'm sending over to you. And I'll read it off here. Most of our clients pay online, card not present, and we know them.
Mhm.
How do we protect their transactions? We don't really need a terminal.
Okay, so again, so now we're talking about card not present transactions, and the assumption is that these transactions are taking place through some software, either through a online payment gateway like Constellation Payments, or through a shopping cart, e-commerce type environment. In every case, there are technologies in place to address this type of fraud. So card not present fraud is a very big problem. As EMV becomes more and more prevalent in the card present world, there will be a spike in the card not present world when it comes to fraud. And again, we can look at Europe and Canada to see how that has happened. So as a merchant who's accepting payments online, you need to get, again, I'm aware of the different groups we have that are on this call, and I know many of them are either Constellation payment merchants already, in which case please reach out to us and let us show you all the hard work and brilliant minds that we've put towards solving or addressing card not present fraud. But any merchant who's accepting payments online should be doing some asking all the right questions of whoever is handling those transactions via the gateway, and really all parties involved too, right? So if you have a shopping cart software and a payment gateway, both of those entities need to be preparing the right types of encryption, what's called tokenization, and I wish I had more time. Maybe if there's no more questions, I'd love to tell everybody how tokenization works. But tokenization is probably the fundamental principle in protecting online transactions. So that would be the first question I would ask any gateway or shopping cart provider is, tell me about tokenization and how it's utilized for my benefit. So hope that helps.
Okay, we have another question that I'll
Okay.
read off to you. I received a new terminal in March that is EMV compatible, and
Great.
I understand that since I am using a point-of-sale provider that is integrating with your EMV solution, that I will need to get a new terminal that is integrated with my software. The question is, can I use both terminals, one through my software and the other through the merchant account directly?
Okay, so again, and please, if you ask this question, feel free to clarify, but it sounds like what you're asking is that you've got a need for a non-integrated terminal and an integrated terminal. You've already been issued a non-integrated terminal, and now you've come to the realization that you're also going to need an integrated terminal. So if that scenario is accurate, if I've assessed the situation correctly, then yes, you will need and can have two different terminals. It's a complicated use scenario, right? Because it sounds like it's a possibility you may have multiple merchant accounts and things like that. So, depending on your comfort level and what you're trying to accomplish, and again, use case is everything, right? Because if you have depending on how complicated it is that your own business and what daily life looks like in the customer-facing side of things. Depending on what that looks like, in my mind, as a business person having done this for so many years on the merchant end, I would want all my eggs in one basket, and specifically, I want one place to call if there's a problem. I want one company who's got my back. I want to be able to pick up the phone or send an email and say, hey, I've got a question about this or that, or I've got some funding questions. I want to make a change, this or that, and I want one place to call and one person to talk to and no one to pass the buck to. So in a scenario like that, I would strongly say this, and again, we're willing to earn your business. We work really hard for that. So those of you who are considering becoming a Constellation Payments merchant, if you're in a situation like this, we'd love to compete for that standalone business, and we've got solutions for standalone terminal use cases. and inexpensive at that. So, the question simply becomes, what do I do with my old technology? I've just been issued this EMV terminal by another relationship, and if I were to replace it with an EMV terminal from Constellation, and then in addition have a Constellation supplied integrated terminal, what do I do with this old terminal? So the first question, if you paid for it, is you own it. And especially right now, there's going to be a large market for that type of terminal. You should be able to get your money back by reselling that terminal out there. I always sell my old iPhone a week before I buy a new iPhone, and I'm always shocked that I lose very little money in the transaction when it's all said and done. So this is a very similar situation. Technology has changed. Devices are people are in need of upgraded devices, but there's quite a few people who are in need of almost upgraded devices or nearly as upgraded devices. So you just got to do the math, right? So if you save enough per transaction because you move to us, or if we were to earn your business and save you enough on your transactions year-round that it financed the change in technology, then it would be worth it, and it would be a convenience to you as a business owner. So I think that's it. If that's not the exact question you asked, please again send us a clarification.
Okay, we have a couple more questions.
Awesome.
This one is, I get a customer call in to make a payment over the phone. The card is not present, but it's a chip card, EMV, and I use a non-integrated terminal. Am I at risk?
Well, let's go back to the slide. It's a card not present transaction is the real answer. Okay, so in a card not present environment, someone's reading you a number over the phone. You're unable to utilize the EMV card, but and so you're doing a card not present transaction. There's going to be a small increase in the amount of liability that you incur there as a merchant, and so you may want to develop strategies for determining when those are when it's okay for your staff to accept a payment type of that. If I was to guess that that's a rare one-off moment here and there, as on a one-off basis, I might do it, but I wouldn't want it as an ongoing practice in my own business. That said, because the terminal is always going to be your first line of defense, but you're going to have scenarios where that happens, and just like other instances in your business, you're going to take a little risk to gain the value of that payment. So, it's a card not present transaction.
Okay, we have one last question. You mentioned that Constellation and then also the gateway. Is Constellation the gateway, and can we continue to use Elevon?
Okay, so Constellation Payments is in fact a fully capable gateway, and we process transactions just in that exact same way. Now, that said, we're also a merchant services provider as well. So one of the things that's unique about our company is that rather than having to have a relationship with one relationship to develop a merchant processing account and a separate relationship with a payment gateway, and again have that issue where you never know Peter tells you to call Paul and Paul tells you to call Peter because it's not their problem. There's a lot of buck passing. By having an integrated solution like ours, where everything's all in one place, you just make one phone call. So in that case, we can provide all of those exact same services. And if you're using one of our integrated partners, software product partners, you'll in almost every scenario, you'll be using our gateway, and probably saving a ton of money by doing so. But there are use cases out there where very rare circumstances where that might be necessary. And again, email me if that's you. Email me and let's hash it out. Let's figure it out. Let's find the right solution that's customized for your business. That's what I do every day. I threw my rubber stamps out a long time ago. We don't allow them at Constellation. We look at each company, each user, each use case individually and try to solve it one at a time to make sure it's the best solution. So, send it to me. I'll figure it out.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rick.
How much fun was that?
That was great. That was great. We do have another question about contact info on switching to Constellation and saving, but that may be something for towards the end. I don't know if you had a little bit more to cover.
I think we're at the end. So,
okay.
That really becomes the next question. And as we wrap things up, where do you get a terminal? Well, again, the great news is if you're already using a software product, like I know we have some users of the MyVolo software. Well, don't worry. You're going to get information via the folks at MyVolo that'll directly inform you on which terminals their software is going to be prepared to support and how you can get yours, and all of that is coming very, very quickly. So you're more than welcome to reach out to your software providers, but trust me, they want you to upgrade as bad as you want to, so don't be surprised if they beat you to the punch. Now, you may have some more questions. You may like to review the different terminals. Maybe you are a software provider and you're trying to, kind of nail this down. It's a really multifaceted problem, and you want to make sure that you're making the right choice, not just for now, but as things change in the future, as you gain more and more users and more merchants. How does that affect, which terminals we offer, which technology, and so forth? So you may like to go through and review all those options. And again, as I mentioned, and as this slide alludes, in many cases, the best thing to start with is a rate comparison, right? If you're going to use us, if you're considering using us, then it all starts with finding out, well, what are the mathematics involved there? What am I paying now? What could I be paying? What service change, differences in service, what increased level of service can I expect? All of those things. I'm confident to tell you that we can cover everything that you are currently using one of our competitors for, and we very likely offer some solutions and or a higher level of service than you're used to. And I stand by that. I think that we do a really, really good job. We have a brilliant team in place. So get a rate comparison, and then that's the jumping off point. It's kind of like if you went to your doctor and said, "What's wrong with me?" He's going to need to examine you first. So we're going to need to take a look at where you are and where you want to go. If you're a point-of-sale provider, if you are a software developer and there's any transactions that pass through your software, talk to us. Our partners are so happy with how smooth and fast and painless this integration has been. The biggest challenges are those that are presented by each unique partner. But on our end, the work's been done. Our folks are very smart, and they've tried to anticipate all the most common needs and even those needs that only they lay awake at night saying, "Oh, we got to solve this. We've got to make it better." We've done a really good job of that. So if you give us a call, we'd love to discuss the variety of use cases you might have and help you, just help you pick the right solution. Not more than you need and not less than you need. So I think again, we stand out in the industry. It is our desire to say to the world that you don't need to live with a company that already thinks they know the answer to your question before you ever pick up the phone and call or send over an email. So certainly there are policies in place, but we like to look at each individual company, each individual scenario, and address it one-on-one. So no, we don't say, thanks for your email, here's a link to an article, and try to avoid taking your call. We're going to spend as much time as necessary with you. If we need to get more technical people involved, as we'll do it, whatever it takes. So I have a certain amount of knowledge, but there is a limit to that, and my wife will confirm that, I'm sure. So in those scenarios, we will very quickly get you in front of the right people so that technical people can talk to other technical people and get the right answers for them. So if you are a partner or considering becoming one, I think we do a really good job of making you not feel like you're out on an island alone. So here's that contact information I've been promising you. There's all my telephone numbers and email addresses, and down at the bottom right of your screen you'll also see a toll-free number for those of you who might want to use that. But myself and the entire Constellation payments team are passionate, enthusiastic about business, about commerce, about helping people achieve greater results, do things a little easier, have a little less stress, and you know, it's amazing how much a little more money in your bank account can do to make things easier and less stressful as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. We'd love to help you with that.
Great, Rick. Thank you so much for a great presentation, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining today's call. It was recorded, so you will be receiving an email later on this week with a link to the recording. And as Rick mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to him by phone. His number is 267-287-1035, or you can reach him by email at rellis, that's RELLIS, at csipay.com. Thanks so much, everyone, and thanks again, Rick, for a great presentation.
Thanks, Kristen. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.